Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, whackers, smackers, and safe crackers, welcome along to the Joe Spivey YouTube channel, where we discuss books and little else, and where we often even break bread with the long since dead. You join me on, it's just brightened up actually, but it has been a dreary and rainy day in Britain up till now. The entirety of my nation is currently under the control of Storm Babbitt, something really bad, particularly the north of Scotland. Aberdeen is going to get, I think, about 3 months of rain in 12 hours or something completely absurd like that. But beyond that, it's reasonable weather today, thank the Lord. It rained all night last night, unfortunately, and we have a specific type of guttering just outside of my bedroom there, which means that the water collects and then drips down onto my windowsill, I believe, meaning that it sounded all evening as though I was sleeping next to some sort of Tolkien troll, which was having a little wee next to me, which was lovely to hear a troll urinating all night by my bedside. So I didn't get an awful lot of sleep, and it was a bit unpleasant with it raining all night. But anyway, I am back for Victober. I was having a little watch of, or a little rewatch of Alan Bennett's History Boys last night, the film, rather than the actual theatre play. It's been a while since I read the play. I enjoyed it as an adolescent, but I rewatched it last night and wasn't ever so sure. The bits that I drew from it were Dakin's rather painful and weird sort of militaristic allegories that he applied to sexual conquest. So when he talks about breaking down a woman's defence and about making sure that her legions submitted to you and things like that. A little bit sickening. Didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to, but then there's still the hector quotation about thoughts that you thought being peculiar to you being grabbed at you by an author that's long since dead. But yes, you join me for another installation of our Victober series, the series on BookTube where people are not so much encouraged but socially compelled to read about Victorian literature, perhaps even some non-fiction and some poetry and things of that nature. So you join us for our next instalment. Today we have... Oh, you're also joining me with my fine pink hot water bottle as usual. I don't have beagles that can bound up to me and jump up and I can turn to you and regale you and make sure that they look cute. I don't have that. I do have what I'm sure you'll agree is a very, very well-trained and docile pink hot water bottle. So yes, thank the Lord for that. I'm cuddling that because it's still pretty cold here. But yes, without further ado, we have Tennyson's In Memoriam, which is, I think, a 3,000-line elegy, started in 1838, written, completed, published in 1850, written in iambic tetrameter, meaning that it's got 6 syllables and with rhyme, strictly de-dum, 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 so it's metrical, it scans, and most of it is written with 4-line stanzas with the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A, which means, of course, that you can circle back, and it gives it a really cyclical, gives the whole poem on the whole a very cyclical quality. Little caveat, of course, because most poetry that is produced nowadays, you can't really draw much of a distinction between it and just normal prose, because the general view on poetry now seems to be, I shall write a random thought, and then instead of with prose, I shall write a comma and then continue that thought on the same line. I'll just write underneath it, and then that's poetry. There is no rhyme or rule to most modern poetry. It's what's called blank verse, which has its place, but not nearly, it shouldn't oughtn't to be as nearly as preponderant as it is nowadays. But nonetheless, the analogy that I always like to draw when people say that somehow blank verse is freeing and shows, as I say, a writer's poetic liberty or some codswallop like that, I like to think that I like to use the analogy that, well, you'd quite like to have a nice evening, perhaps, with many friends, and you'd like to have a playful evening in your sitting room, and you'd like to have, wine and cheese and crackers and all things of that nature and have a jolly good time. But you'd quite like that to be facilitated in a very safe structure. You need rules and regulation, perhaps involved in the building of the house in which you have that playful, energetic evening, you still need the structure around it to be reliable and tested and adhering to certain long established notions. That's my opinion. I think most poetry ought to rhyme. I think it ought to have. I think it ought to scan. I think it ought to be metrical because of things such as we've talked about the Keats heuristic, meaning the rhyme and reason effect. So you can say no matter how true or no matter how profound the statement is, it sounds much better when it's rhymed. So the man who for a living digs up roads finds no pleasure in fickle odes. I mean, that's obviously a complete codswallop in and of itself, but you instantly, when you hear the rhyme, you prick up like a little meerkat and think, oh, Lord, that sounds rather nice. So I love poetry that rhymes. I love metrical poetry that adheres, as I say, to scansion. This iambic tetrameter, and this is Alfred Lord Tennyson was made poet laureate just shortly after this, I believe, ennobled by Ms. Victoria, Queen Victoria, after whom our little booktube event is named. And this is basically written in direct response to the sudden, tragic and unexpected death of his best friend, Mr. Arthur Hallam, who was an old Etonian whom Alfred met at, I want to say Cambridge, University of Cambridge. They joined the Apostles' Society, a very small cleaving of young gentlemen that went to discuss poetry and more metaphysical ideas like that. So he meets Hallam and is, as everybody was, there are quotations from Gladstone about Hallam and him being the most wonderful mind of his generation and him being an excellent poet and a great thinker and somebody whose presence very easily latches onto you the moment you meet them. And he was found to be, well, first of all, he had intentions on Alfred's sister. I want to say Amelia, but I can't quite be certain. And he found his way to Vienna. I think that he was with his father, and he had, I think, what we would diagnose nowadays to be a cerebral hemorrhage. I think it was. It was an aneurysm. Essentially heart failure. Died on a sofa next to a fire with a book in his arm, like most precocious aesthetes of that generation tended to, and rightly and expectedly, Mr. Tennyson was absolutely. It's just a grief probably unknown to us, given that we know most of us know 3,800 people, whereas in this era, although there was a mass industrialisation and people were being shoved together, you still didn't have many friends beyond your family and a small circle of friends such as the Cambridge Apostles. So this hits him hard, and this is worked on for a long, long time. Obviously, this is the Oxford World Classic. This has got Ulysses, Idylls of the King, odes to everybody from Wellington to Victoria herself, I believe. Lots of critical apparatus as well. But yeah, the In Memoriam that we focus on is about, I think it amounts to about 100 pages, and it's sort of flitting and meandering and tries, I think, at best to imitate what it is to go through grief mentally. So there are allusions to Hallam being brought back from Italy on a boat, presumably in a coffin. There are bits. There are huge sections where Tennyson lays out his adulation for him. There are speculation. Tennyson speculates as to whether he has gone to a higher place, whether he has gone to some sun-gilt, gorgeous land where he will be, whatever vision we have of heaven, forever wafted with palm leaves by sylphs or whatever. He ponders about, essentially however he is to go on without this person, whilst also, as I say, speculating on whether or not there is an afterlife, that he's gone somewhere, whether indeed there is an overwatching God, quite how such an evil and horrid thing could be could happen to such a person of such relevance and brilliance, and I think magnanimity as well. I don't think he was a pompous guy, this Hallam. So yeah, all sorts of stuff on that. A few sections that I wanted to highlight, but as I said, the adulation with which Tennyson clearly holds it. This is clearly a man completely wrecked, not knowing how on earth he's ever to kindle or cultivate any more friendships beyond the one that he has lost. He's very obviously completely broken, and it's lovely to read. It's absolutely gorgeous to read. As I say, a few sections I want to highlight just for your pleasure. So we have the very opening sort of first page, which is talking about God's influence, a higher influence, which is, again, it's all done pretty beautifully. So I shall read reasonably slowly, and hopefully you can pick up on some of this. Strong Son of God, immortal love, whom we that have not seen thy face, by faith and faith alone embrace, believing where we cannot prove. Thine are these orbs of light and shade, thou madest life in man and brute, thou madest death, and lo, thy foot is on the skull which thou hast made. Thou wilt not leave us in the dust, thou madest man, he knows not why, he thinks he was not made to die, and thou hast made him, thou art just. So you can see there probably how you have a setup with one particular word, and then of course the fourth line then rhymes with that, which really packs it in there, and so you have little microcosms of feeling and thought within a poem that has 3,000 lines. You have 4 lines that seem to be self-contained, and as I say, in and of themselves, which is really good. This is the first of many of Tennyson's thoughts on the existence of God. That we've mentioned this before about the guy's name's going to evade me now, but the geological discoveries and us suddenly realizing that the world on which we live or the world in which we inhabit is impermanent. That the trees that Coleridge and Wordsworth and Keats and Byron had idolised just 30 or 40 years ago, those trees had not been there for the entirety that the earth had been there. There was a growing impermanence and a realisation that the world is a changeable place and a much older place, and perhaps a divine creator didn't put us here, and perhaps it's that we just somehow evolved out of swaying Neanderthals instead of being plunged down here by a well-meaning guardian. So yes, that's that section, which is lovely. But the bits that I really want to highlight are the adulatory sections, because rarely has anybody been held in such high esteem. This Hallam guy, I would have loved to have met him. As I say, he was lauded by William Gladstone, who went on to be Prime Minister, who knew him at Eton, and nearly everybody that knew him loved him. And so here is one of many of Tennyson's renderings of him. He essentially ranks him much above members of his family. Sphere all your lights around, above. Sleep, gentle heavens, before the prow. Sleep, gentle winds, as he sleeps now. My friend, the brother of my love. My Arthur, whom I shall not see, till all my widowed race be run. Dear as the mother to the son, more than my brothers are to me. So you have the widowed race be run is a little bit of a constant allusion here by Tennyson. He mentions it, I think, 3 or 4 times, in that his life is incomplete without this grand old fellow that the like of which he will probably never see again. And so we've got more sections. This is a little bit of a longer section. This is on, again, what Hallam was set to achieve, he believes, and how it's just this deep regret that he almost wants to change. He almost wants to offer to swap places with Hallam. He's thinking, I'm just an utter douche that's left on this earth to chin stroke and produce mediocre to decent poetry, and you, my sainted, marvellous one, have gone. And so this is what he talks about. Dost thou look back on what hath been as some divinely gifted man, whose life in low estate began, and on a simple village green, who breaks his birth's invidious bar, and grasps the skirts of happy chance, and breasts the blows of circumstance, and grapples with his evil star, and who makes by force his merit known, and lives to clutch the golden keys, to mould a mighty state's decrees, and shape the whisper of the throne. And then he said, and then right at the end he says, who ploughs with pain and natively, and reaps the labour of his lands, or in the furrow musing stands, does my old friend remember me? Yeah, so he talks about what on earth it would be for Hallam still to be here. So, yeah. We've got some other sections that I wanted to highlight as well. What else have I got to read here? And he also talks about the potential children that obviously Hallam and his sister might have had, and how wonderful that would have been. Thy blood, my friend, and partly mine, for now the day was drawing on, when thou shouldst link thy life with one of mine own house and boys of thine, had babbled uncle on my knee, but that remorseless iron hour made cypress of her orange flower, despair of hope, and earth of thee. I seem to meet their least desire, to clap their cheeks, to call them mine. I see their unborn faces shine beside the never-lighted fire. It's gorgeous and excellent and brilliant. I really enjoyed this poem. It's not something that's going to take you hours and hours to read. It's probably 2 sittings, that's what it was for me, even if you're reading in a very deep and contemplated way. So yeah, I've really enjoyed this. This has been another one of my Victober series. This hot water bottle is doing me lovely here. It's very well behaved, aren't you? Yeah, very well behaved. This is a pink hot water bottle of the Boots breed. If any of you live in Britain, Boots sells, what does it sell? Contraceptions and skincare and things of that nature. So yes, excellent poetry. There's a clear dividing line in Tennyson's life between him being made poet laureate and then tending to universalise a little bit more. He talks more about societal struggles and he tends to try and seek out a sort of commonship, a fellowship, rather than the deep, isolated, contemplative stuff of beforehand. Because he was born Lincolnshire, which is just over the Humber Bridge from me, not far, 10-minute drive, and was born to a rector, one of 14, I think. Had a horrid, well, not a horrid childhood, but a very lonely childhood, one senses, without many friends or much joy at all. But yeah, that is our read for today, Tennyson's In Memoriam. Our next book will be, I did float the idea of Daniel Deronda, but I'm not quite in the mood for more George Eliot. I don't really know why. I think I've kind of been there and done that at the moment. So I've managed to dig out from my A-level days, my sixth form days, Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Mr. Hardy, which I don't know how much my feelings of this book are tainted by, sort of the ennui that comes with sixth form, and me being a complete and utter fool in sixth form and school, and not really embracing much of what this might have had to offer in its day. So I'm hoping, having matured infinitely, as I'm sure you can tell, I am a well-rounded, almost one might say complete person now, that this does a little bit more for me. So yeah, it's quite short actually. It's a lot shorter than I remember it being. So I'll get this through over the weekend. I am going to be hopefully doing something about length and lack thereof, because I've been reading Tennyson, and I think that I have I've certainly had as much enjoyment of that as I did on a Dickens novel of that length. So I want to not investigate, because that's a little bit of a highfalutin term, but I want to discuss and provoke and perhaps have a discussion on whether length necessarily informs as to whether something is good or not, or worth it or not, or enjoyable or not. So yes, again, you guys are being far too kind. If you could at least put in the comments some horrid nefariousness every now and then, just to check my ego, because all I've had is, you're brilliant, you've made me laugh, you've made me watch till the end, where has this type of video been on BookTube? Both private messages and the public comments have been far too nice. So if you could be horrid and insulting in the comments, that I'm not inviting that. Don't worry, I'm not inviting that. But yes, I'll try not to be jocular for one moment. I'm very thankful for what for subscribing and for liking my videos and for starting the conversations in the comments. I do believe that our both patron and BookTube patron and BookTube pariah Steve Donahue. We have arranged to have a 40-minute, one of his much loved 40-minute conversations with booktubers and certain other people that he wants to talk to. I think that's scheduled for around about 24 hours from now. We're going to record that on his channel, so I'm very much looking forward to doing that with Steve, having a big long chat with him about goodness knows what's going to come up. But yeah, the only thing that is certain is that it will hopefully be interesting and worthwhile and funny and, yeah, damn enjoyable. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I've droned on for 20 minutes again without realising. But yeah, that's been another Victober. I'll see you in a little while for Test the D'Urbervilles and things of that nature. Thanks very much, BookTube.